Thank you for joining Let's Meet Where We Eat, conversations with innovation and entrepreneurship leaders who specialize in food and nutrition. Our series is presented by Nourish Cafe and the Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute at the Tufts Friedman School for Nutrition Science and Policy. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Nourish Cafe. Thanks for joining us today. We are really fortunate to have an amazing leader in food systems with us today, Bill Layden. He is not only an incredible leader, but he's also an ardent supporter of the Friedman School. He's one of our entrepreneur advisors and has just been a great supporter of everything we do here at Friedman for quite a while, Bill, right?
Yes.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to have Bill talk about what he does now, and then we're going to have Bill walk us through a little bit of his pathway of how he got here. You've got such an interesting resume, Bill, of all the different places you've been. And then we're going to close with a real focus on what are those hot topics that the students should be really focused in on, and maybe not even the current ones, but what are the ones down the road that are just going to become bigger and bigger and bigger and more important. So let's start with you just giving an introduction of yourself and what you currently do at Layden Enterprises.
Well, thank you, Katie, and thank you, Jim, for inviting me. So Layden Enterprises actually, I would say, is a part-time gig for me right now, mostly focused on academia in terms of trying to help them think about how to leverage science and to improve more knowledge. So I've spent a fair amount of time with Texas A&M, in particular, actually trying to launch an institute called the Institute for Advancing Health Through Agriculture. And that is a tremendous enterprise for me personally, thinking about how you could take human nutrition and move that back into the system of agriculture in terms of improving the food supply, right? So I'm very pleased to be a part of that situation, actually.
And Bill, if I remember correctly, you've had experience at USDA in nutrition.
Yes. So in my formative career, I was a congressional investigator. I worked for the General Accounting Office, now the General Accountability Office, and then worked on the Hill for the House of Representatives in what was called then at that time the House Committee on Government Operations. And my jurisdiction at that time was focused on the Food and Drug Administration and USDA. And so all you students are too young to remember this, but the E. coli 015787 Jack in the Box incident, I was the congressional investigator that did those investigations, actually.
And I remember that
led actually to supporting Mike Taylor, who was at USDA at the time, for declaring 015787 as an adulterant in raw meat. First time in the history of the United States that would happen, actually. And then I moved from the House actually to work for USDA at the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion under Dr. Eileen Kennedy, who was affiliated with Tufts, right? And
Excellent.
Dr. Kennedy, and I'll tell you, just this is a true story. I was unemployed. We had our first house, we had our first baby, and I had received several offers to go to do different things, actually. And I got a call from Carol Tucker Foreman, and she says, you want to take the next call from me, from Dr. Eileen Kennedy. I said, I don't know Dr. Kennedy. And she goes, well, do you know the WIC program? I go, of course I know the WIC program. And she goes, well, you want to take that call. So I took the call, and it was Dr. Kennedy, and she says, we have a position opening, and I want you to apply. Mike Taylor says you have to apply. I said, well, Dr. Kennedy, I don't meet any of the qualifications that are in this RFP. Now, you have to understand, this was in the day where there was no email, right? This is a fax machine churning off 27 pages of.
Oh my God. There's no LinkedIn background. There's
no, nothing at all. So I look at all this pages flying out, and I look at the bottom, and it's calling for a PhD RD. And I go, so I call Dr. Kennedy, and I go, I'm sorry. You have to understand, I am not a PhD. I'm not an RD. And she goes, no, I want you to come in tomorrow morning. And I don't know if you know Dr. Kennedy. She's at the Freeman School.
Yes, her
Um,
office is right next door to mine.
and she is a feisty individual, right?
Yeah,
And
that's to put it mildly. Yes.
yes, yes. So of course, I need a job, right? I got a mortgage, I got a young kid, right? And so I go into the office, and truly, she closes her door and sits down. And she goes, Mr. Layden, sit down. She goes, I read what you submitted, and I like it. And I go, well, thanks, Dr. Kennedy. And she goes, here's the deal. I am the nutritionist. You are not. I got that. But you worked on the hill, and I need help on the hill. And so
Oh.
that begot a wonderful partnership, actually, for me working for the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion. And it was a life-turning event, actually, because I learned a lot about nutrition, but I also learned a lot about how to partner with the private sector in order to make nutrition actually happen in real lives of the people that we were trying to serve, actually.
Huh, that's a
And
phenomenal story. I love that. And it's such a lesson for our students that sometimes opportunities come along that you don't think are the logical next step, but taking a chance can be a good thing.
yes, and well, and then also opportunity,
Yeah.
because it was a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really great story. I love that. So I would love for you to illuminate for us a little bit. And obviously, you could write a book on this, but at the Institute, we work with private industry, as you know. We have
Mhm.
90 members of our council from private industry and nonprofit, and working with them to try and improve the food system. What are, when we think about that, we think about the levers and pulleys, and sometimes it just feels so complicated. What are some of the big ones that our students should understand about private industry? I think our students come in not knowing private industry well. I
Right.
think they may come from a public policy background or nutrition background. What do we need to know about the opportunity in private industry?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, for 17 years, actually, I was very fortunate. Jim Tillotson taught a course on health claims, and that evolved over a period of time. I think Dr. Richard Black is now teaching that course, right? And so
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to be a lecturer during most of those courses. My point of view on those was you actually have more of an opportunity to actually impact public health through the private sector than you can through the private. I'm sorry, you can have more of an impact in impacting public health through the private sector than you can through public health.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because the private sector is the one who is selling goods and beverages to people around the world. And if you can have any sort of an influence in terms of the composition of those foods and beverages, you can impact millions of people more than anything else you can do in the public sector. And
Hmm.
so, even if you have just a small opportunity, and I will give you a couple of examples.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
In my life, I was very fortunate out of a matter of circumstance, quite frankly, to be able to help the Almond Board of California, help them to think about how to leverage nutrition, health, and wellness in order to increase the consumption of tree nuts in the United States, right? Avocados, the same thing, right? If you think about it in the course of what I was doing for multinational companies like Nestle, helping them to understand they have to stop being a company that manufactures just sugar in terms of trying to then produce real food. They're doing that actually, and so you can have a tremendous impact overall and uh, I can't tell you the exponential factor of that is tremendous in terms of what you may be able to do. And just small changes can make a huge difference globally in terms of how you actually affect that. And quite frankly, if you have an opportunity like I did to work with the CEOs of those multinationals to help them understand that they need to think about what the future generations need to thrive and how to help them thrive, that's tremendous.
And as you're saying that, Bill, I'm also thinking about climate change. And one of the conversations we've had with our members recently is how does your food supply chain potentially impact climate change? And backwards, how does climate change potentially impact your food supply chain? What
Right.
are your thoughts and insights on how this is a new layer and how this is going to get tackled?
Well, again, good question, Katie. Thank you. So I would say back in 2012, so 10 years ago or more, I was advocating to some of our major clients, the National Dairy Council, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and other animal protein companies. They had to think about climate. They had to think about what it means to be responsible in the future. And there's also a story for them in terms of animal agriculture has a lot to do with how the cycle of methane, how the cycle of things happen. That's not well understood. But I would say that total energy consumption is an issue, right? So if you think about it, we all live based on sunlight. We all live based on how sunlight comes down to the earth, how that then produces plants, how the animals eat plants. I mean, just in a simple format, right? Just think about that from a simple format, right? What is it we can do then to help humans understand how to minimize their impact on the environment? Now, I would say this: the environment's going to happen no matter what we actually do. Um, we all know the Earth has gone through major changes over the course of millions of years, right? So our situation is just a little blip in time. However, that doesn't mean that we can't be more responsible in terms of how we actually manage our time on Earth, right? And how we actually then think about that in the course of how we feed ourselves. So, and there could be a issue with regard to there may be better places on Earth naturally to grow certain foods, vegetables, and animal protein that can feed humans. So that doesn't mean that every nation needs to do the same thing. So if we just figure out how to do a trade proposition, right? So maybe the best place in the world to grow cattle is in the United States. Maybe the best place to grow
Right.
avocados is in Mexico or South America. Maybe the best place to grow soy is in China. I don't know. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
making this up, right? In terms of so intellectually, we can figure out what is the ideal situation for us to nurture and sustain ourselves.
Yeah, my background's in land use and economic development,
Yeah.
and so even on a United States basis, it's sort of if we were able to not compete as individual states for individual economies and think more as a country, you could think about more of a comprehensive economic development land use plan for this country, which we've never done. And every state has to fight for its own economy, its own everything, which creates some problems in this.
Yeah, but think about this though. If we could actually have some architecture to think about this on a global
Yes.
basis,
Yeah.
how more efficient could we be actually?
Right.
Now, I understand perfectly well it may not measure up with the economic piece, but from a sustainability purpose, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's where data and artificial intelligence and satellite imaging and a whole lot of interesting tools are going to come in. They're going to make it easier to make those
yeah,
arguments, Bill,
yeah,
completely. I think it's really interesting.
yeah.
So as we're thinking about big issues, and we were just talking about a bunch of big issues, you started talking about backing in the food supply chain with nutrition sort of being
Mhm.
the first primary, filter. And we also talked about private industry. How do you think private industry views or approaches that value proposition of creating a value supply chain that's primarily focused on nutrition first? And taste and texture is obviously got to be up there and margins have to be up there.
Yeah.
How do they think about this?
I'm thinking how the best way to respond. In part because I have been very fortunate in my career. I have worked with Kraft um, when they were going through, you know, the thought they were the world's biggest cookie company. I have
Mm.
worked with Nestle, the world's largest food and beverage company. And I would say that, in all honesty, that companies can only do so much because they respond to consumer demand. And consumer demand usually means we want something that's going to taste good, be consistent for every single $1.89 I'm paying for a box of whatever, right? Or a
Right.
bag of whatever, or a box of whatever, right? And that takes a tremendous amount of ingenuity and engineering and logistics to
Yeah.
deliver that. Actually, I mean,
Yeah.
it's an amazing proposition that globally, um, very intelligent people have been able to deliver that for other people. That said, um, nutrition comes and goes for those companies.
Hmm.
I have worked with them on a national and global basis, and I would say it comes and goes, unfortunately, in
And
part
comes and
because
goes as consumer demand on that focus comes and goes.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah, and in fact, it's been challenging for me as an individual to accept the fact that there are periods of time when I can actually influence a company's direction and get them to, I would say, meet the needs of what the human health needs are, right?
Hmm.
And then I have to accept that ultimately that doesn't necessarily make money.
Huh. Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
there truly are entrepreneurs, individuals, and companies that are really earnest in terms of trying to make this transition. And I do believe that those will have tremendous influence on the multinationals ultimately.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I do think that we continue to be in an upward trend of consumer awareness because of social media, consumer awareness of health and nutrition. And I think as we work on things like food as medicine more, and we think about how to modulate disease through nutrition, you know, Dean Mozaffarian is always very clear to say nutrition's a pretty new field. It's actually not that old.
Right.
And so as we continue to go through it and understand how to build these relationships, Bill, perhaps the opportunities are going to continue to increase.
Yeah, I hope so. Let me take issue with one thing though, and Daria and I know don't agree on this. I don't believe food is medicine. Food is so
Explain.
much more than medicine.
Yeah.
Food can be medicine, but most
Yeah.
people enjoy food for the sensational effect they have, or with the families or their friends, right? I mean, it is a social experience that we have with food.
Yeah.
So to declare food as medicine, that's medicinal food. No, no, that's not what most people eat every single day. So we
Right.
have to, yes, I understand the proposition of food as medicine in terms of trying to improve public health from that context. I get that. But the reality is, people don't eat medicine.
Right. But I like your amendment to it, which is food can be, you know, in a disease state, food can be therapeutic, food can be medicinal. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But people eat multiple times during the course of the day, over the
Right.
course of 365 days. They're not thinking about its food as medicine. They're thinking
Right.
about what is the sensory experience I can have, what is the enjoyment I can have, who are the people I'm eating with, right? And so we have to
Yeah.
think about food in the context, yes, food can be medicinal, right? Food
Yes.
can help us. That doesn't mean food is medicine. Food is um, much more than medicine, actually, for us. I mean, medicine solves a specific issue. Food actually embellishes us emotionally, physically, spiritually, actually.
Yeah. You're not
If you
alone
think
in
about,
that
if
view.
you think about,
I will tell you when I'm feeling depressed, my food is medicine for me as a Hostess pink snowball, by the way. You know, I mean, we all self-medicate in different ways. I self-medicate with pink Hostess snowballs. I doubt that's what my doctor would recommend.
I'll have to remember that when I meet you next month.
Yes, that's right. So, Bill, this is fantastic. I knew that talking to you, we would get to dive into a lot of really thorny issues, and we're only creating them on the surface. But as a top view, what I think it's so brilliant about these few minutes we spent together is it shows our students that this is complicated. This is not a black and white ecosystem.
Right.
This is complicated, and to dive into it, the opportunity is vast,
Yeah.
but don't underestimate how complicated this system is.
Right. Well, and but I would say don't be shy about the complications, right? Because
Mm,
for human knowledge, I mean, yes, we depend on science to give us as much information as possible. But when it comes down to it, humans actually also have to evaluate the science with values in terms of what we value in society, what we value as an individual, what we value as a community. And those are big factors for which our, quite frankly, in my humble opinion, our system has not quite figured out how best to balance, right?
yeah,
So if you think about, yes, we are trying to nourish people who depend on food assistance programs in the United States and globally, right? And how do we best do that? How do we engineer something that's going to provide a system for which no one has to go hungry at night?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and to me, those are the fundamental questions that I look for you, students, to help us solve,
That's
honestly.
right.
Because these people with the gray hair, we have not yet solved that. And we depend on you to help us do that.
That's right. And that's a great note to end on. Bill, thank you so much for being with us. Stick around. We're going to have a Q&A with the students after this. And everyone, once again, thank you for joining Nourish Cafe.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Jim.